Father Elias had been the parish priest for over a decade, living a peaceful and predictable life in the village. His days were filled with offering guidance, conducting Mass, and providing counsel to his congregation. Yet recently, his peaceful existence had been disrupted by an unsettling presence. It began with an owl. The first time Elias noticed it, he thought nothing of it. He had been walking in the woods near the village, reflecting on his morning sermon, when the owl appeared. It sat perched on a high branch, watching him with those piercing yellow eyes. At first he assumed it was a coincidence, simply a bird in its natural habitat, but the next day the owl appeared again, and the day after that. It never approached him, but always kept its distance, as though trailing him wherever he went. Soon it became apparent that this owl was no mere coincidence. Father Elias tried to ignore it, dismissing it as a strange, harmless event. But it soon became impossible to shake the feeling that something was amiss. The bird was always present, following him from place to place, appearing at odd times during his walks, his prayers, and even while he performed his daily duties at the church. Its eyes, glowing in the dark, would be the first thing he saw when he stepped outside. The priest began to feel an unease grow within him, like the owl was watching him, waiting for something. It felt as if it had been sent for a purpose, to deliver some kind of message. The feeling became stronger each day. Was it a warning? A divine sign? Father Elias turned to prayer, hoping for clarity, but the owl remained steadfast, silent, and enigmatic. He couldn't help but wonder what it wanted from him and what he had to learn. His faith told him that signs like this were meant to lead him to a higher truth, but what that truth was remained elusive. Days turned into weeks, and the owl's presence continued to linger, growing more insistent and harder to ignore. Wherever Father Elias went, whether he was in the village square, walking down the narrow dirt roads, or even kneeling in prayer at the church, the owl would appear. It stayed just within view, perched on a branch or soaring above him, its eyes never leaving him. Each time he looked up, there it was, silently observing, and he couldn't shake the feeling that it was studying him, waiting for him to understand something. The bird's presence grew more oppressive. It no longer kept its distance as it had before. It would follow him closely, and every time Elias turned a corner, the owl would be perched just out of reach, as if guiding him or pushing him towards something he didn't fully understand. Father Elias started to feel as though he was being hunted, not in the traditional sense, but in a spiritual way. He felt an intense pressure, as if the owl were not simply following, but urging him to uncover something hidden deep within him. He began to question whether the bird was a sign from God, or if it was something far darker. His thoughts raced. Had he missed something in his life? Was this owl connected to something he had forgotten? His growing obsession with the bird started to consume him. Every time he tried to focus on his work as a priest, the owl's presence seemed to interrupt his thoughts, drawing his attention back to its steady, unblinking gaze. It was like the bird knew more about him than he did. No matter how much he prayed for clarity, the bird stayed by his side, its unwavering attention only adding to his mounting anxiety. Deep down, Father Elias felt that something was drawing closer. The owl was leading him toward a truth, one he didn't fully understand, but one he could not ignore. As Father Elias spent more time contemplating the owl's mysterious presence, his thoughts began to turn to the past. The bird's unrelenting gaze reminded him of something long buried deep within his memories. The day his mother had disappeared. He had been a child at the time, a boy of only 8 years old, when his mother had taken him for a walk in the woods near their home. He could still remember the quiet murmurs of the forest, the rustle of leaves underfoot, and the cool breeze that brushed past them. But the memory of that day had always been clouded in mystery. His mother, once a loving and caring figure in his life, had always been a bit of an enigma. She had been secretive, wise, and distant. She would often tell him that owls were guardians of secrets, and that one day an owl would come to guide him on a journey. At the time, Elias had thought little of it, as children often do when they hear their parents' strange words. But that day, when they walked into the forest, was different. His mother had led him to a secluded area near the trees, asking him to wait while she ventured deeper into the woods. He had waited for hours, but she never returned. When he finally left to search for her, he found nothing. She was gone, vanished without a trace. The police had searched the woods for days, but there were no signs of her, no clues, no footprints. Her disappearance remained unsolved. Father Elias had never spoken about it, not even to his father. It was as though she had disappeared into thin air. Now, as the owl continued to follow him, those memories resurfaced with startling clarity. It was almost as if the owl had been there the day she vanished. Could this bird have been connected to his mother's disappearance? Was it somehow tied to the mysteries of his past? Father Elias could feel it in his bones. The owl was not just following him. It had a deeper purpose. It was part of a larger story, one he had yet to uncover. Unable to dismiss the growing connection between the owl and the unresolved mystery of his mother's disappearance, Father Elias began to search for answers. He revisited old journals, letters, and anything he could find that might shed light on the strange events of that day. In the archives of the church, he discovered a letter his mother had written shortly before her disappearance. The letter was cryptic, filled with references to spirits, the forest, and owls, symbols that held deep meaning. Elias carefully examined the words, trying to decipher the hidden messages. The more he read, the more he felt that his mother had known something important, something that had been passed down to him but hidden from him until now. He spoke to the elders in the village, hoping to find some trace of information that would lead him closer to the truth. Many of them remembered his mother with affection, describing her as a kind-hearted woman who helped the poor and healed the sick. But there were also whispers. Some villagers spoke of her strange connection to the forest, and a few even hinted that she had been involved in mystical practices. One elderly woman, a former friend of his mother, told Elias that his mother had often spoken about the guardians of the forest, mysterious creatures that could lead a person to hidden knowledge. Could the owl be one of these guardians? Was it guiding him to something his mother had discovered? Father Elias became consumed with the idea of uncovering the truth. Every day he ventured deeper into the forest, retracing the path his mother had taken. Each time he returned to the woods, the owl was there, watching him closely, as if waiting for him to unlock the secrets of the past. The answers were still out of reach, but Elias knew that the owl held the key to unlocking them. The tension in Father Elias's chest grew as he spent more and more time in the woods, each visit bringing him closer to the answers he sought. On one particularly quiet evening, as the sun began to set, something extraordinary happened. The owl, which had always kept its distance, suddenly swooped down and landed on a low branch, just a few feet from him. Elias froze, his heart racing. The owl's eyes locked with his, and for the first time, it felt as though the bird was speaking directly to him, without words. He slowly stepped closer, his breath shallow. The owl tilted its head slightly, as if beckoning him to come forward. The air around him grew still, and in that stillness, a vision suddenly flashed before his eyes. He saw his mother standing in the same woods, looking just as she had that fateful day. But this time, she wasn't alone. She was speaking to a figure in the shadows, a figure Elias couldn't quite make out. Their conversation was muffled, but the feeling of urgency was palpable. His mother's face was filled with a sense of knowing, as if she was preparing for something she couldn't avoid. The vision faded as quickly as it had come, leaving Elias breathless and shaken. The owl remained on its perch, watching him intently, as if waiting for him to make sense of what he had just seen. Father Elias's hands trembled as he processed the vision. It was a revelation, but it raised even more questions. Who was the figure his mother had been speaking to? Why had the owl shown him this moment? It was clear now that the owl was not just an observer. It was guiding him toward a deeper understanding. The mystery of his mother's disappearance was unfolding, but it was far from over. Elias knew that this was only the beginning of the journey, and the owl was the key to unlocking everything. Father Elias couldn't shake the images of the vision he had witnessed in the forest. His mother standing by the trees, speaking to a mysterious figure in the shadows. It all seemed too surreal. Every time he closed his eyes, he could see her face, filled with both determination and a strange sadness, as if she knew something he did not. The owl had shown him this vision, and yet the figure his mother was speaking to remained an enigma. It was almost as if the owl was trying to push him to uncover a deeper truth, something hidden beneath layers of time and memory. The next few days were filled with a sense of urgency. Father Elias felt the need to delve deeper into the forest, to search for any clues that might lead him to the identity of the shadowy figure. The owl continued to follow him, its presence more intense than ever. As he ventured into the forest once again, the evening sky painted in hues of orange and purple, he noticed something strange. There in the distance, standing by the same trees where the vision had unfolded, was a figure. At first, Elias thought it was simply a trick of the light, but as he approached, he realized it was a person, an old man, hunched and frail, with a long white beard and piercing eyes that seemed to hold centuries of wisdom. The owl, as if guiding him, flew above the man's head and landed on a nearby branch. The old man did not speak at first, but his eyes met Elias's with a knowing gaze. "You seek answers," the man finally spoke, his voice raspy and deep. "But the truth comes at a cost." Father Elias felt a chill run down his spine. The air around them seemed to grow heavier, and he could sense that the old man held the key to unlocking the mystery of his mother's disappearance. The owl's constant presence felt like a sign that Elias was on the right path. But what was the truth he was about to uncover? The old man spoke again, this time with more urgency. "The forest is not just a place, Father. It is a boundary between worlds. And your mother, she was part of something greater." Father Elias stood frozen, the old man's words echoing in his mind. "The forest is not just a place, Father. It is a boundary between worlds." The more he thought about it, the more the words seemed to make sense. His entire life, his mother's mysterious disappearance, the presence of the owl, it all felt like it was leading him to this moment. The old man beckoned Elias to sit, his weathered hand gesturing toward a nearby stone. Hesitant but determined, Elias sat down, his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and curiosity. The owl perched on a branch above, watching intently. The old man began to speak of the forest, of the ancient powers that lay hidden within it. "This place," he began, "is older than the village itself. It has been here long before the first settlers arrived. It is a place where the veil between the living and the dead is thin, where spirits walk freely and secrets are kept." Elias listened in awe, his mind racing. "Your mother," the old man continued, "was one of the guardians of this place. She understood the ancient ways, the balance between the worlds. But she didn't just keep the secrets of the forest, she protected it from those who sought to misuse its power." Elias's breath caught in his throat. "But why did she disappear?" he asked, unable to hold back. The old man's gaze grew somber. "She knew the dangers that lurked in the shadows. There are forces in this world, dark forces, that want to tear down the veil between the realms. Your mother gave her life to prevent that from happening. She knew that one day someone would come, someone who could continue her work." The owl let out a soft hoot, as if affirming the old man's words. "You, Father Elias," the old man said with a piercing look, "are that person. You have inherited her gift. The owl has been guiding you to this moment, to the truth. The time has come for you to embrace your destiny and take your mother's place as a guardian of the forest." Elias felt a wave of shock and disbelief wash over him. Was this possible? Could he truly be a part of something so much larger than himself? His mother had given up everything to protect this place, and now it seemed that he too had been chosen for a purpose he had never imagined. Father Elias's mind swirled with confusion and disbelief after the old man's revelations. He had come to the forest searching for answers about his mother's disappearance, but now he was faced with a truth far more profound and terrifying than he could have imagined. The idea that he, a simple priest, was somehow connected to the ancient powers of the forest, to a world beyond his understanding, seemed impossible. Yet deep within his heart, he knew that the old man spoke the truth. The owl had been leading him all along, and everything in his life had led to this moment. The weight of the responsibility hung heavily on his shoulders. Elias stood in the forest, feeling the air shift around him. The ancient trees, the rustling leaves, and the watchful owl, they all seemed to be waiting for him to take the next step. He had to understand what it meant to be a guardian of the forest, to protect the balance between the living and the dead. Over the next few days, Elias immersed himself in the teachings of the old man. He learned of the sacred rituals that protected the veil between the realms, the ancient knowledge his mother had passed down, and the dark forces that threatened to breach the boundary. The more he learned, the more he realized how little he truly understood about the power that surrounded him. But he also began to see the signs. The owl, once a mysterious and ominous presence, was now his guide. It led him deeper into the forest, showing him hidden paths and ancient symbols etched into the trees. With each passing day, Elias felt his connection to the forest grow stronger. It was as though the very earth beneath his feet was alive, pulsing with energy. He could feel the power that his mother had once wielded, and he knew that it was now his turn to protect it. Father Elias's training as a guardian of the forest had barely begun when the first signs of danger appeared. It started with a series of strange occurrences, unexplained noises in the woods, strange lights flickering in the distance, and a growing sense of unease that settled over the village. The owl, which had once been a quiet observer, now seemed restless, circling above Elias as he ventured deeper into the forest. The old man's warnings about dark forces had not been exaggerated. Something was stirring in the shadows, something that threatened to tear the veil between the worlds apart. One evening, as Elias walked through the forest, the air grew unnaturally still. The trees stood silent, their branches heavy with the weight of an unseen presence. The owl perched nearby, its eyes wide and alert. Suddenly, a rustling sound came from the underbrush, followed by a low growl. Elias's heart raced as he turned to face the source of the noise. Through the trees, he could make out dark figures moving toward him, creatures that seemed to flicker in and out of existence, their forms shifting and distorted. The owl let out a sharp cry, warning Elias of the approaching danger. Elias instinctively stepped back, his mind racing. These were the dark forces the old man had warned him about, spirits from beyond the veil, trying to break through. The owl swooped down, its wings spreading wide, and Elias felt a surge of power within him. He had been trained for this moment. The owl had guided him here for a reason. He raised his hand, calling upon the ancient power of the forest. As if in response, the ground beneath him began to hum with energy. The dark creatures recoiled, unable to pass through the barrier Elias had summoned. The owl remained by his side, its presence a constant reminder of his duty. The battle had only just begun, and Elias knew that his journey was far from over.